The email came on a Monday morning while I was finishing my coffee. Please welcome our new regional director, Veronica Kane. I'd been with the company for 23 years, seen dozens of new managers come and go. Most were decent people trying to do their jobs. Veronica was different. She swept into our office that first day wearing heels that clicked like gunshots on the tile floor. Her perfume was sharp and expensive. Everything about her screamed power, from her perfectly styled hair to the way she looked at each of us like we were items on a grocery list. The younger managers practically bowed when she spoke. They laughed too loud at her jokes and nodded eagerly at every suggestion. But when her eyes landed on me, they lingered longer than necessary. By Friday of her first week, she asked my age in front of the entire team during our morning meeting. I laughed it off, saying experience was worth more than youth. The room chuckled nervously. Veronica didn't laugh. She just smiled that cold smile and said, "Let's hope you don't slow us down, Harold." Something in her tone made my coffee taste bitter. I'd never met someone who could make a simple sentence sound like a threat, but she'd managed it perfectly. The mistake happened on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks later. I was reviewing quarterly reports when I transposed 2 digits in a financial summary. Instead of $84,500, I typed $85,400. A simple error that would take 30 seconds to fix. I caught it myself during my second review and was reaching for my pen when Veronica stormed into my office. She slammed the printed report onto my desk, so hard my coffee mug jumped. "This is careless work, Harold," she hissed, leaning over my desk. "Completely unacceptable." I started to apologize and explain that I'd already spotted the error, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. "I don't want excuses. I want competence." She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Don't make me regret keeping you around." The office suddenly felt smaller. Her perfume was overwhelming, mixing with the scent of fear that seemed to follow her everywhere. I watched her straighten up and smooth her skirt, satisfied with the intimidation she'd delivered. After she left, I sat staring at the corrected report for 10 minutes, wondering how far she was willing to push this game she was playing. The team meeting the following week started normally enough. Veronica reviewed monthly targets while we sipped lukewarm coffee from paper cups. Then she brought up my corrected report. "Harold here made an interesting mistake last week," she said, her voice carrying across the conference room. "Called me old man and suggested I still needed training wheels for basic math." A few people shifted uncomfortably. That wasn't what happened, and everyone knew it. But Veronica was building her narrative. When I politely corrected her version of events and mentioned that the figures in her presentation were actually off by 2%, something snapped in her eyes. She walked around the table slowly, deliberately, until she stood right beside my chair. Then she raised her hand and slapped me across the face. The sound echoed in the silent room. My cheek burned, but the silence that followed hurt worse. 12 colleagues sat frozen, their eyes dropping to the table like they hadn't seen anything. "Don't you ever correct me again," Veronica said calmly, walking back to the front of the room. She wasn't finished. After slapping me, Veronica leaned down so close I could smell the coffee on her breath mixed with mint gum. "One more mistake, Harold, and I'll retire you myself," she whispered, loud enough for others to hear, but quiet enough to sound personal. A few junior staff members actually laughed. These were people I'd trained, people I'd helped get promotions. Now they were laughing at my humiliation because it made them feel safer in their own positions. My pride shook more than my stinging cheek. 23 years of building relationships, of being the guy people came to for help, and it all crumbled in one moment. I wanted to stand up, to shout, to defend myself. But years of professional restraint kept me glued to my chair. I just sat there, face burning, while she continued the meeting like nothing had happened. Inside, though, something fundamental changed. The Harold who tried to keep peace, who swallowed insults for the sake of harmony, died in that conference room. What replaced him was someone who understood that silence wasn't survival anymore. It was surrender, and I wasn't ready to surrender. After the meeting ended, most of my coworkers filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact. They knew what they'd witnessed was wrong, but they also knew Veronica held their futures in her hands. Only one person approached me. Mia, the newest intern, barely 22 with nervous energy and thick glasses. She slipped me a yellow sticky note as she walked past my desk. "I saw everything. Don't let her win." My hands trembled as I read those 7 words. In 23 years, I'd never filed a complaint with HR. I'd always handled problems directly, professionally. But this was different. HR had already ignored smaller complaints about Veronica. I knew that much. Word travels fast in a mid-sized company. People whispered about her temper, her favorites, her way of making enemies disappear from the payroll. But having a witness changed everything. Someone young enough to be brave. Someone who hadn't learned yet that keeping your head down was safer than standing up. The question was whether Mia could withstand Veronica's wrath when the time came. Because if I moved against Veronica Kane, there would definitely be wrath. That night, I couldn't sleep. My wife asked about the red mark on my cheek when I got home, and I lied. Told her I'd bumped into an open cabinet door at work. The lie came easily, which scared me almost as much as the slap itself. She believed me because I'd never given her reason not to. 28 years of marriage built on honesty, and now I was lying about being assaulted at work. In the darkness of our bedroom, Veronica's words echoed, "I'll retire you." The threat carried weight because she had the power to make it happen. 2 years left until my pension fully vested. 2 years that suddenly felt like climbing Mount Everest in bare feet. I thought about my reputation, carefully built over more than 2 decades. I thought about the young employees who looked up to me, who came to my office when they needed advice about spreadsheets or company politics. All of it could disappear if Veronica decided I was a problem that needed solving. But lying there in the dark, listening to my wife's peaceful breathing, I realized something important. Silence wasn't protecting me anymore. It was just making me an easier target. I needed a plan. The next morning, I started digging into Veronica's background. LinkedIn showed a clear pattern. Every company she'd worked for had experienced major turnover among senior staff within 6 months of her arrival. Her previous employer was a mid-sized firm in Phoenix. I found their employee directory from 2 years ago and compared it to their current roster. 7 senior employees had left within 8 months of Veronica's promotion to department head. On a professional forum for our industry, I discovered a thread about toxic leadership. One anonymous post described a female manager as a storm that ruins careers for sport. The timeline matched Veronica's tenure perfectly. I printed everything I could find, creating a folder that grew thicker each day. But information alone wasn't enough. If I moved too soon, before I had ironclad proof, she'd crush me and make it look justified. So I waited, gathering evidence like a patient hunter. Veronica thought she'd broken me with one slap. She had no idea she'd actually awakened something much more dangerous. The herald who got slapped was weak. The herald who was planning her downfall was methodical, careful, and absolutely committed to seeing justice served. The slap replayed in my mind constantly. The sound, the sting, the silence that followed. But mostly I thought about her confidence, the way she'd done it so casually, like hitting employees was just another management technique. If she was comfortable slapping me in front of 12 witnesses, she'd definitely do worse when no one was watching. I needed proof that would hold up under scrutiny. I researched recording devices online, finally settling on a pen camera that captured both audio and video. It looked like an ordinary ballpoint pen, but recorded everything in high definition. The battery lasted 6 hours, more than enough for a full workday. When it arrived, I practiced using it at home until the recording functions became second nature. My wife asked why I was suddenly so interested in fancy pens. I told her I was thinking about upgrading my office supplies. Another lie. They were getting easier, which worried me. I told myself the camera was just insurance, a way to protect myself if things escalated. But deep down, I wanted more than protection. I wanted proof that would make Veronica choke on her own arrogance. Justice delayed wasn't justice denied. Sometimes it was justice perfected. The next week, Veronica called me into her office for what she described as a mentoring session. I clipped the pen camera to my shirt pocket, making sure the lens had a clear view. She started calmly enough, discussing my performance issues and the need for improvement in attention to detail. But her voice grew sharper with each criticism. "Your outdated methods are dragging down the entire team," she said, standing up to pace behind her desk. "That tie you're wearing went out of style 20 years ago. Everything about you screams obsolete." She slammed a folder onto her desk, making her coffee mug rattle. "You're one slip away from becoming history, Harold. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" The pen camera caught every word, every gesture, every sneer. She was performing for an audience of one, completely unaware that her performance was being recorded for posterity. I left her office with a faint smile, knowing the trap was working perfectly. Veronica's arrogance was becoming my greatest asset. I kept each recording labeled and organized on a private drive at home. Date, time, duration, and a brief summary of contents. My wife thought I was working on some kind of personal project, which wasn't entirely wrong. Mia quietly offered to help back up the files to her own cloud storage. If she ever deletes your stuff or has IT lock you out, I've got copies, she whispered during a coffee break. This young intern was showing more courage than managers with 15 years of experience. While they kissed up to Veronica and pretended not to see her abuse, Mia was actively helping build the case against her. Why are you risking this? I asked her one afternoon when we were alone in the break room. Because someone has to, she said simply. And because I've seen what happens to good people when bad people get away with being bad. Veronica thought she was untouchable, surrounded by fear and enabled by silence. She hadn't counted on loyalty being used as a weapon against her. The pen camera was just technology. Mia's courage was what would make the difference when everything fell apart. Veronica began assigning me impossible deadlines, clearly trying to force mistakes that would justify firing me. Spreadsheets due by midnight. Presentations needed by dawn. Reports that required data from departments that wouldn't respond until the next business day. I dragged my exhausted body through each assignment, fueled by rage and the knowledge that every unreasonable demand was being documented. When she cursed at me for being slow as molasses, the pen caught it. When she threatened to end my pathetic career, I smiled inside. The late nights were brutal. My wife worried about my health, suggesting I should consider early retirement. Maybe it's time, she said gently. You've worked hard enough. But I wasn't ready to let Veronica win. Each impossible deadline she set was another piece of evidence for my case. Each private tirade was another nail in her professional coffin. She thought she was breaking me down, preparing me for defeat. Instead, she was writing her own termination letter one thread at a time. The irony was beautiful. Veronica's attempt to destroy me was actually making my case stronger. The second public incident happened on a Friday afternoon during our monthly finance review. Veronica was presenting budget numbers when I noticed a calculation error that would affect our quarterly projections. I raised my hand politely and pointed out the mistake. The third quarter figures show a 12% increase, but the math actually works out to 8.7%. Veronica's face flushed red. I didn't ask for your input, Harold. I know, but the numbers. I said retire already, she shouted, slamming her hand against my chest hard enough to push me back in my chair. The room went dead silent. This time, even the brown-nosers looked uncomfortable. Physical contact crossed a line that made everyone nervous. My pen camera, positioned perfectly on my shirt, captured the entire exchange from the ideal angle. Her hand making contact, the force of the shove, the look of rage on her face. I didn't react. I just adjusted my glasses and looked her straight in the eyes. The numbers are still wrong, I said quietly. She had no idea she'd just handed me the bullet I needed to end her career. That weekend, I visited my old friend Martin, a labor attorney who'd retired 3 years earlier. We'd known each other since college, back when we thought changing the world would be easy. Over coffee in his kitchen, I showed him one of the clearest recordings. His face grew harder with each second as he watched Veronica shove me and heard her threats. This isn't just workplace misconduct, Harold, he said, rewinding to watch the physical contact again. This is assault and age discrimination rolled into one convenient package. Any decent attorney would take this case for free just for the publicity. He leaned back in his chair, studying the frozen image of Veronica's twisted face. The question is, do you want to settle quietly or make noise? I want justice, I said, and I want her to understand that actions have consequences. Martin smiled for the first time that morning. Then keep gathering evidence. Document everything. And when you're ready to strike, make sure it's fatal. The fire inside me grew hotter with his encouragement. Monday morning brought a new form of torture. Veronica made me redo an entire quarterly analysis that she had personally approved the week before. No explanation, no acknowledgement of her previous approval, just a demand to fix your sloppy work. I spent the entire day recreating 40 pages of charts and summaries. By 6 p.m., When most people had gone home, I delivered the completed report to her office. She took the stack of papers, flipped through them quickly, then walked over to the industrial shredder and fed every page into the machine. The grinding sound filled her office as my day's work became confetti. She watched my face the entire time, clearly enjoying the power trip. "Try again tomorrow," she said with a smirk. "Maybe you'll get it right the second time." My blood boiled, but I didn't flinch. She was so focused on humiliating me that she didn't notice my pen camera recording her deliberate destruction of company documents. The shredder's whine was like a countdown clock ticking toward her doom. I wasn't the only one watching anymore. Two mid-level managers, Alex and Carmen, approached me quietly after the shredding incident. Word had spread about my treatment, and they had their own stories. She told me I was replaceable like printer ink, Carmen whispered during lunch. Said the company could find a dozen people to do my job better. Alex nodded grimly. She's been making my life hell for weeks. Impossible deadlines, public criticism, the whole package. I've been thinking about quitting. They asked if I had a plan for dealing with Veronica. I didn't answer directly, but I smiled and told them to keep their ears open. The tide was turning. Veronica's reign of terror was creating its own resistance movement. People who had been too scared to speak up individually were starting to realize they weren't alone. Fear was powerful, but shared fear could become collective courage. And collective courage was exactly what I needed to bring Veronica down. She thought she was dividing and conquering. Instead, she was uniting her enemies. I worked late into the night, drafting a comprehensive report of every incident. Dates, times, witnesses, and supporting evidence for each violation. The document grew to 30 pages, chronicling a pattern of harassment, discrimination, and abuse. Each line felt like hammering a nail into Veronica's professional coffin. The slap that started everything. The impossible deadlines designed to force failure. The public humiliation tactics. The physical shove witnessed by the entire finance team. By dawn, I had built an airtight case that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. Every incident was documented, every witness identified, every piece of evidence carefully indexed. But one question haunted me as I printed the final version. Would HR have the courage to act against their star director? Veronica had brought in 3 major contracts in her short tenure. She had allies in senior management who valued results over employee welfare. The document was my weapon, but I needed to be strategic about how I used it. One shot was all I'd get, and if I missed, Veronica would make sure I never got another chance. I scheduled a private meeting with HR, choosing my timing carefully. Veronica was out of town at a conference, giving me a window to present my case without immediate retaliation. The HR manager, Beth, had always struck me as fair but cautious. She listened as I explained the situation, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "These are very serious allegations, Harold," she said carefully. "I hope you understand the gravity of what you're suggesting." I slid a USB drive across her desk. Everything is documented. Video, audio, witness statements, and a timeline showing the escalating pattern. Her eyes widened as she watched the conference room slap on her computer screen. The sound of Veronica's hand hitting my face echoed in the small office. "Oh my God," Beth whispered. "She actually hit you." For the first time in weeks, I saw fear in someone's eyes that wasn't directed at me. Beth was finally understanding what kind of person the company had put in charge. That evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Harold." Veronica's voice was tight, with barely controlled rage. "I know what you're trying to do." "I don't know what you mean," I said calmly. "Stop playing games. Someone talked to HR about our private conversations. Stop before you regret it." The threat was clear, but her panic was even clearer. Veronica was starting to realize that her reign of terror had consequences. She didn't know exactly what evidence I had, but she knew it was serious enough to make HR nervous. "I haven't done anything improper," I said. "Have you?" The line went dead. She didn't know that HR already had the files, didn't know that the investigation was already beginning. But her call proved that the walls were closing in. For the first time since the slap, I felt like I was winning. HR announced a compliance review the following week, using language careful enough to avoid legal issues but clear enough to signal serious investigation. Veronica returned from her conference with her usual confidence, but I noticed the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The investigation moved quietly but thoroughly. Mia, Alex, and Carmen were called for private interviews. Other employees who had witnessed incidents were asked to provide statements. Veronica tried to maintain her normal routine, but the cracks were showing. Her jokes were sharper, her criticism more personal, her eyes constantly scanning the office for signs of betrayal. She knew something was happening, but couldn't pin down exactly what. The uncertainty was eating at her, and it showed in the way she snapped at innocent questions and stormed through the hallways. The wolf was finally sniffing the trap, and she didn't like what she smelled. She couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. On Thursday afternoon, Veronica barged into my office and slammed the door behind her. "You think you're clever, Harold?" she spat, her composure completely gone. "You think you can destroy me with lies and manipulation?" I stayed calm, knowing my pen camera was recording every word. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb with me." She grabbed my tie and yanked me forward, her face inches from mine. "I built this department. I brought in millions in revenue. They won't choose some washed-up old man over me." Her hand was pressed against my chest as she leaned over me, her rage finally completely uncontrolled. The camera captured everything perfectly. I looked her straight in the eyes and whispered, "Smile for the camera, Veronica." Her face drained of color as the words sank in. She released my tie and stepped back, understanding for the first time that she'd been playing a game where she didn't know the rules. 2 days later, HR security escorted Veronica out of the building. She barked that it was all a mistake, that she'd be back Monday with lawyers, that heads would roll for this outrage. I sat at my desk, expression carefully neutral, though inside I was trembling with relief and vindication. The office buzzed with whispers as people tried to understand what had happened to their untouchable director. Some employees looked relieved. Others seemed nervous about the power vacuum. A few of Veronica's closest allies avoided eye contact, probably wondering if they were next. But I knew this was just round one. Veronica had connections, resources, and a lawyer on retainer. The suspension was a victory, but the real battle was still ahead. The war wouldn't be won until she could never hurt another employee again. 22 ***. With Martin's help, I filed a comprehensive lawsuit against both Veronica and the company. Assault, battery, hostile work environment, age discrimination, and retaliation. The legal papers were filed on a Friday afternoon, guaranteeing maximum coverage in Monday's business news. The story spread quickly through our industry. Senior employee sues Fortune 500 company for workplace violence. The details were too juicy for reporters to ignore. Some coworkers thought I was crazy to challenge the company at my age. Why not just take early retirement and avoid the fight? But they didn't understand what this was really about. This wasn't about money or revenge. It was about accountability, about proving that power doesn't give you the right to abuse people, about making sure Veronica never destroyed another career. The truth was heavy enough to crush both her and the system that protected her. The trial began 6 months later in downtown courthouse packed with reporters and industry observers. Veronica's defense team painted me as a forgetful, overly sensitive employee who had misinterpreted normal management feedback. They showed charts of my declining productivity and highlighted my age as evidence of diminished capacity. For 2 days, they systematically attacked my competence and credibility. Then my lawyer pressed play on the first recording. The jury watched in stunned silence as Veronica slapped me across the face in front of 12 witnesses. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. The second video showed her shoving me and threatening my job. The third captured her grabbing my tie and yanking me forward while spitting curses inches from my face. Gasps filled the courtroom as the evidence destroyed her defense. Veronica sat pale and rigid as her own voice echoed through the speakers, dripping with contempt and rage. The judge's gavel struck hard when the videos ended. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. The company settled immediately, knowing an appeal would only generate more bad publicity. The settlement was large enough to fund a comfortable retirement, and then some. Veronica lost her position, her professional reputation, and her license to work in our industry. The state board revoked her certifications after reviewing the evidence. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, shouting questions about workplace violence and corporate accountability. I simply adjusted my glasses, found Mia's face in the crowd, and smiled. She had stood up when it mattered, risking her career to help an old man seek justice. The least I could do was acknowledge her courage publicly. The real hero here, I told the reporters, is the young woman who had the courage to speak truth to power. Mia beamed as cameras turned toward her. Her career was just beginning, and she'd already learned the most important lesson. Doing right matters more than playing safe. 6 months later, I sat on my back porch with a cigar, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. My pension remained untouched, my savings doubled by the settlement, and my dignity fully restored. Mia visited regularly with updates from her new job at a firm that actually valued integrity. The old company had overhauled their HR policies and hired a workplace culture consultant. Some good had come from the pain. As we talked and laughed, I thought back to Veronica's thread in that conference room. "I'll retire you myself." She was right about one thing. I did retire, but I retired on my own terms, with my head held high and my reputation intact. I retired knowing that a bully had faced consequences and that other employees were safer because of my fight. The cigar smoke drifted away on the evening breeze, carrying with it the last traces of anger and hurt. Justice had been served, and it tasted sweeter than I'd ever imagined. Veronica Kane had taught me that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to hit back harder than they hit you.